Hello everyone, NWE War Reports here with the January 31st, 2023 Frontline update. Just some quick housekeeping. As many of you see, I haven't posted in a week. Some of you guys already know this, but I know a lot of you don't follow me on Twitter. So I'll just go ahead and say it. I got a community strike and was banned from posting to YouTube for an entire week. So I'm sorry I didn't really have a way to get that message out to you guys. For the 600 or so of you that follow on Twitter, you got it. But for the 30,000 some odd subs, you wouldn't have seen that message because you're actually not allowed to post video updates or even text communication updates. I didn't even have a way to let you guys know that I had been banned. For any of you guys knowing why, like YouTube has a strike policy where if you violate their rules, the first time is a warning, the second time is a strike, and you can't post anything for a week. And what the strike that I had gotten was actually for hate speech, I guess is what it was. And as a video I posted that you can no longer see anymore. And basically, just for context, I had posted the video because it had some drone footage and some footage at the time where we could geolocate the location of Russian troops in the Donbass, which I personally think is beneficial to the Ukrainian side if we could do that. But there was a Russian guy giving an interview. A Russian soldier giving an interview in the video speaking Russian with no captions. I don't speak Russian. I don't know what he said. But apparently he was speaking hate speech, and that's what, got me the strike and then the rejected appeal. I will say if this was legitimate, like if he actually was speaking hate speech or if this was just targeted in the sense that someone was like, oh, look, this is a Russian soldier. Let's just try to get this video taken down and get him a strike. Forget all that. Let's just assume that he was saying hate speech and that someone at YouTube, that would mean someone at YouTube can translate what he was saying from Russian into English, which makes you question why I can't post videos up with captions in all different languages for viewers around the world. So, either way, it's a gotcha there. YouTube, bare minimum, let me translate things into different languages if you can. And then maybe I would know if these people were saying something hateful or against policy. But, there was no malintent with it. I was just trying, I guess I probably could have posted it with context, maybe in the description to say, like, what the purpose of me posting that video was for. But, I guess it got flagged as like Russian propaganda or something and got taken down. So, in case that ever happens again, I do have the Twitter channel. You can come to NWE War Reports and see where, the status of the war is there. Or I have started a Rumble, which many of you have been talking about, which, probably isn't going to be worth my time. I've actually managed to link it to the YouTube, so when I post to the YouTube, it'll automatically upload it to the Rumble as well within a certain amount of time. And it's not great quality on here. Any of you guys have used it before. It's just, not great quality. But the videos will be uploaded there as well. All right. So, diving into the front lines, first to talk about northern Ukraine, and this is kind of going to be a week update over the things that have happened over the last week, and then tomorrow I'll start with the daily updates once again. But, so Russian sources report that defensive preparations are being made in the Sumy region to counter potential Russian invasion and that new minefields are being installed. So we've heard this a couple times. Specifically, they're talking about this area here, Krasnopilya. It seems to be kind of a hot spot. A week or two ago when we'd heard that there's Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups crossing the border, it was actually in this region here as well. So that's the area of the map they are talking about. In Kharkov, Russian troops actually temporarily entered the village of Ternova. So that's right here. You have a bit of a cross-border raid. Briefly, they entered Ternova. I think this whole episode is over. At the time, they were claiming that they had penetrated Ukrainian lines some like 500 meters. So wherever Ukrainian lines were, maybe along this tree line, maybe in these forested areas. That doesn't, just because Russia isn't in Ukraine doesn't mean the front line is necessarily right up on the border. But wherever it was, the Russian troops sabotage group managed to enter that town temporarily, and this saga seems to be over at the moment. So, actions like this one, the one in Sumy, and some of the others taking place around the front could potentially be some kind of probe to see and observe Ukrainian troops and see how they react, or specifically observe the movement of Ukrainian troops and see where they pull their reserves from and whatnot. Who knows? There could be some secretive purpose for it, or it could just be some kind of botched attack. We really don't know. So other reports are right now in terms of northern central Ukraine that Ukraine is continuing to train up newly mobilized troops, allegedly with all Western equipment. That's what the Russians are saying. In terms of infantry equipment, I find that probably likely because the West has donated quite a bit of that. These troops will probably be deployed over the summer with the arrival of Western tanks and IFVs. Alright, so moving to the Svatova front, no real changes in the front lines here. There's been contact along the line in some of the same places, Tavolzhanka in that area, in the area directly across from Kupiansk. So Kislivka, down to the south near Kuzumivka and Novoselevska, there's been fighting, but no real movement by the Ukrainians there. The heaviest fighting has actually taken place in the forests to the southwest of Kremena in the Dobrova area. There's quite a bit of combat footage from here, and there's some things said, and of course I'm not going to show any of this footage to you on here based on the ban, but there's some things said by a Russian soldier that were translated. I believe this was actually on Twitter, so you might be able to see it on there. But there was a number of BMPs. They were moving up a road. It was definitely one of these roads here in the front lines where, the road kind of dissected through the front lines. And the Russian troops were in their trench, and the BMPs pulled up in front of the Russian troops and started firing down into Ukrainian trench. And the Russian soldier was saying something along the lines of heck yeah, don't let them push forward any further, or something like that, which makes me believe that these were recently arrived VDV troops that were blunting an offensive by Ukrainian troops. So at least in that video is what it seemed like. So it seemed like the Russians were on the defensive in this area, but were starting to gain the upper hand, I guess you can say. So the defensive power was starting to balance out the Ukrainian offensive power. And then there was later another video that came out of a BMP-T Terminator, which is the new Russian IFV. It's actually designed or built on top of a T-72 chassis. But they're active in the area and have an incredible amount of firepower. Honestly, there was a video of it firing off its magazine or whatever, and it was really something. Honestly, it's on Twitter somewhere. You can probably find it on NWE war reports, but it seems like the heaviest fighting on this entire front is definitely going on in this forested area. In terms of where exactly the fighting is, I'm not exactly sure. There is some kind of village or resort area somewhere in here that potentially changed hands recently. Maybe it's this one right here. Maybe the Russians have recaptured this, or the Ukrainians have recaptured it. I'm not exactly sure, but it's tough to tell exactly where these things are going on here. All right, so moving south to the Seversk front, we're now considering the Seversk front everything down from really Soledar and up. So, and most of the information here is coming from the southern parts. It seems like there's two things that have happened here north of Krasnopolivka. The Russians have expanded their zone of control in the direction of Mykolaievka. So they've advanced in this direction. They have not entered this town yet, but they have expanded here and captured some ground. And allegedly, they have also captured this town here of Sako I Vantseti. And if you'll notice this right here, this is actually, both puts Russian troops across the Bakhmut River here. And it's the intersection of two roads that lead up towards Seversk. So this is actually one of the supply roads for Seversk that we're seeing here, and it comes up through here. So the fall of this town, is not good for the Ukrainians in Seversk. So, I've gotten this report from one source. It's from Syriac Maps. It's not. It's far from the worst source. It's actually probably one of the better ones that I've seen so far. So I personally believe it, but I'm not going to change my map around until I get some additional sources to confirm it. Now, we do have pretty good information here about what's going on directly to the west of Soledar. It appears that Wagner troops have captured Blagodny. There's actually photographic evidence of them in town here at some kind of intersection. So that puts the Russian troops across the Bakhmut River in another location. So two locations, both north and south of Soledar. Puts them across the Bakhmut River. And it's allowing the Russians to put more pressure on this area here of Krasnogora, Pereskokiivka. They can actually now attack it from multiple different angles. So that should help the Russian effort in capturing this region here. And it should complicate things for the Ukrainians. Now, in terms of looking at the Ukrainian defenses in the area, we've actually heard quite a deal about this. This ground here is the low ground, right? You have the river running through here. We'll actually go to this map, I believe, because it shows... gives us the meters in terms of the height of the region. Now, it's not really saying here. I believe I've seen, so you have like 85, upper 70, 79 meters or something in this area down close to the river. 92 meters. This is upstream. It's a north flowing river, so it's a little higher. So the low ground here is in like the 80s, right? And then the Ukrainian defensive positions outside of this area are actually on the knoll of this hill here. So it's a pretty good defensive position for the Ukrainian side because, as you can see right here, 163 meters. This is about 100 meters above the valley below. So, that's 300 feet. That's pretty substantial difference in height, right? So it is an advantageous point for the Ukrainian side. It will be difficult for the Russians to break directly through and say capture Zaporizhzhia. They're going to have to go around and kind of follow the towns. They're going to have to capture Pereskokiivka, Krasnogora first, Sako I Vantseti, and then work their way up the road. It's going to be really tough to push the Ukrainians off of this hill for the Russian side. So, defensively, Ukraine is still at an advantage in this particular area. Now, in terms of Bakhmut, there's information that the Russians have moved pretty deep into this part of town. So there's some kind of zone of control here, a couple blocks. I'm just really drawing and guesstimating here. This isn't precise, but there's a couple city blocks captured in this area. The Art Winery, which is somewhere in this area, and keep in mind there's actually 2 different locations. There's the champagne and wine factory here, and then there's an art winery, which is zoomed in a little more. It's like in this area. This art winery was captured by the Russians, and then there's information that they've advanced through this part of town several blocks as well. So, heavy fighting still in Bakhmut. Gains, are slow but steady. Kind of hard to point out exactly where they are geographically, but this is the latest information. And just so you guys can see what I'm talking about with the art winery, doesn't look like we're going to get... Yeah, the icons aren't showing up right now. Don't have the best connection, but I believe it's actually one of these buildings right here. Maybe this building here. Alright, so to Klashivka. Finally, I think we have enough confirmation where we're going to adjust the lines here. It appears pretty definitive that the position at the top of the hill has fallen. The latest word is that Russian troops have attempted to storm Ivanivsky. Probably that attack failed and was repelled. And they have also entered and captured vast parts of this forested area here to the south of Ivanivsky and Chasiv Yar. So we're going to adjust this. And we're going to put this line randomly out here somewhere because we know the Russians control ground across the canal, but it doesn't seem like we have any definite information on where exactly they are. No drone footage from this area yet that I have seen. If you have seen it, please share it on Twitter with NWE War Reports. So Bielogora and Dilovka, the Russians have expanded their zone of control in this direction. They claim that an attack on Dilovka is imminent, but in terms of where exactly those gains are, I can't map it out for you guys or even confirm really it's true. That's just the rumors from the front here. Alright, so there's a little bit going on in the area of Toretsk, some fighting, some activity here, but nothing that I can really map out for you. Just specifically ground that's changing hands somewhere in this area of Mayorsk. It might have been the case that the Ukrainian side still has positions on the rail line here, and the Russians haven't captured the full canal, but I'm not exactly sure. I need to study up on this part of the map. To the south in Pesky, there appears to have been a Russian offensive over last week. This is one of the bigger ones. The claim is, or the territorial extent is that the Russians managed to capture not just this section and this part of Vadian, but all of Vadian, extending all the way down through this direction and poking into Pervomaiske here. So you have a pretty big zone of Russian control that was established here rather quickly. And this is kind of important. It creates a big threat to Pervomaiske, and not only Pervomaiske, but zooming kind of out here, showing you guys exactly where these alleged gains are. Says they've captured up into here, and this area really, actually, to be honest with you guys, the front is more like this, and then this area here is the war zone. So this is the mapping that I've seen, right? Like basically the Russians control this area here. This area is war zone. After the fall of Pesky, the Russians had pushed kind of deep into Pervomaiske, and then Ukrainian counterattacks have pushed them back. And since then, most of the fighting has been really kind of in this area right here. But now, since this counterattack, this puts Pervomaiske under threat, which also puts Novelsky under threat, because Novelsky is fed by a service road right here that leads into Pervomaiske. So this is the only road that leads in and out of this town. So should Pervomaiske fall, of course, the Ukrainians can keep moving supplies to Pervomaiske through the fields, but without a road, things will become much more difficult there. So this is one of the areas that Russia has launched an offensive over the last week and has had a little bit more success. Should this information hold up and hold true? It's from Rybar, which proves to be a little more or significantly more reliable than some of these pro-Russian military bloggers, but still, there's some information comes out that is questionable. You should always take it all with a grain of salt. Continued reports of fighting in Marinka. Really, along with these reports, Russian sources are claiming that the capture of Marinka is more or less impossible until the supply routes leading in and out of town are captured. So these roads here and here have to be brought under Russian fire control before they can capture Marinka. That's really all the news here. And then finally, and this is the biggest news of the day, starting 21 minutes into it, or the biggest news of the week, is a Russian assault on Vuhledar. Now, I'm going to use kind of the ISW map here because it kind of confirms some things real quick. But this is the extent. This is the furthest extent of control a couple days ago that the Russians were claiming here. And as you can see from the ISW map, they actually geolocate confirmed assessed Russian advance. So you can see the difference between these two: claimed and then assessed Russian advance here. Actually, this this is on the screen for you guys. Sometimes I forget, and I got the screen shrank down. But the Russians had advanced into these dachas. This is a small housing area village. The Russians were saying they're like some kind of summer homes, like vacation homes or something. And they had also captured some intersections and areas which I'd managed to geolocate on Twitter to the southwest of town. So as you can see here, they were trying to encircle it from two sides. Now, what had actually happened here was the Russians had kind of launched an all-out broad attack here. And I believe this is, there might have been some kind of greater strategy to this, which I think is also kind of flawed. But you have these assaults on Soledar, you have the offensive in Vadian, and you also have the attack on Orekiv, which all could have been an attempt to spread out the Ukrainian reserves, right, and move them all across the front line. That way they could zero in on Vuhledar. All the Ukrainian reserves are already engaged, and hopefully they can take Vuhledar quickly before reinforcements could arrive, right? Or that's what it seems like the plan was here. So real quick to adjust this, I want to bring this down because at the start of the offensive, it seemed like not even all of Mykolaiv was under Russian control. They were pretty secure in Pavlovka, and this housing area here was not under Russian control. So what had happened is they launched a broad offensive. They'd moved up and captured this crossroads right here. They had moved into the other side of Mykolaiv and captured this entire area here. And then they had spread out into these dachas from several different angles. And once they'd consolidated this, they'd advanced straight up through here. And at their furthest extent, they had captured these houses here. So at one point, you have the Russian line virtually looking something like this. And even there was claims that the pumping station or some kind of pumping station in Vuhledar right here had been captured by Russian forces. Well, the Ukrainians managed to counterattack, and they pushed the Russian troops completely out of the dachas. So probably from here, probably from the coal mine, they pushed in, pushed the Russians back in this direction. and moved the front line roughly back here, or maybe even further back here. So, very successful counterattack on behalf of the Ukrainian side. They'd moved some kind of reserves that they'd had in the area. Specifically, a lot of this is done by the Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade, I believe is what it is. And it's one of the more experienced and better equipped brigades in the Ukrainian army right now, mainly because, it's been on the front line basically the entire war. But it has not been part of Bakhmut or any of these personnel draining operations. It's a lot of the same guys that have been in the unit the whole war, or if they did go through a big replacement wave, those guys have been fighting for quite some time. So this is a very capable brigade that's defending Vuhledar here. Now, since this has happened, keep in mind this has been a whole week. The Russian forces are creeping back up on this dacha. No word that they have recaptured it yet, but they are pushing back in this direction, trying to force the Ukrainians out. And they've also pushed out in this direction into these fields here and captured the high ground, which is somewhere in this area, not sure where it is, that overlooks the coal mine, which is right here. This is the coal mine. So should the Russians, it seems like obviously at first they try a partial encirclement of Vuhledar, try to get some angles to where you can cut these roads coming into the back of town. That failed. So now they're trying to, reestablish their positions and at the same time spread their offensive out towards the flanks more, and try to do a wider encirclement of the area. So, should they capture the coal mine, Vuhledar would be probably in quite a bit of trouble. They still have roads leading through here, and I believe here that can supply the town. But, once this position falls, the Russians can start working in this direction here, and then from that point it's only a matter of time. A direct storming of Vuhledar is not necessarily in the cards for the Russians. It's far too well defended. The buildings are too tall. It's too dense with Ukrainian troops. But that is essentially the map here and what's going on with the map here. So you have Russians up to here, and somewhere in these fields here, with a big question mark in this rectangular type box right here. And then finally, a quick note on the Zaporizhzhia front on Orekhiv. Most of you guys already know this, but any kind of offensive actions here in this area appear to have stalled. There probably still is sporadic fighting and positional stuff, but more or less, to me, this seems like maybe a probing attack, maybe a positional attack, or had it been a serious attempt for a Russian offensive, then the Ukrainians fought it back pretty handedly. So, one or the other, either it wasn't as serious as an offensive as we thought it was, or it was, and the Ukrainian side just, really defeated the Russians here. So, outside of a couple trench lines in between Nestryanka and Rabolny and Orekhiv, like basically this area we have marked here, all the towns that the Russians attempted to storm, Mala Sherbaki, Nova Andriivka, Novo Danilivka, Mala Tokmachka, the Ukrainian side managed to drive the Russian troops out of those towns. Alright guys, that's it for me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the update tomorrow.